Hello, it's the 2nd of April. This is Broadcasting Scotland at 7, although it's about 7:30 at the moment. We've had serious news this afternoon, following on from the marathon show yesterday evening of Brexit and the indicative votes. Mrs May and her cabinet have been in session in 10 Downing Street in London the whole day. Apparently there was 3 hours of a political cabinet, which was without members of the civil service being present, and then they came back, and apart from a break from lunch, they were hard at it all day trying to come to some idea about what will happen after everything really has been rejected. We've rejected Mrs May's deal. They've rejected having a second vote. They've rejected Joanna Cherry's motion yesterday to stop the Brexit altogether in its tracks, should we come to a no-deal scenario. And now Mrs May has given a speech in Downing Street saying that she will ask for another extension to the Brexit deadline, and she will reach out to Jeremy Corbyn and see if they can come to some agreement as to how we can move on from this particular situation. And the only way you could describe the situation is crisis, a crisis within the midst of a chaos. In the meantime, here in the Scottish Parliament, which is a relatively calm harbour out of the huge ocean of tsunami that we're going through in the southern part of the United Kingdom, our First Minister has made suggestions that we should postpone the idea of a recess of the Parliament, the Holyrood Parliament, over the Easter period, because the 22nd of April is the day, I beg your pardon, the 12th of April is the big day coming up, and we will leave the European Union without a deal on that day unless people can come up with something better. And so there have been some comments on the Twitter feed. Ian Dunt said, my instinct is that this is a trap. When the statement started, I was impressed by the tone and the content, but the giveaway is at the end, when she, Mrs May, says withdrawal bill must be passed by May 22nd. The First Minister then went on to say this: this thread highlights a massive danger. If MPs allow 12 April to pass with no commitment to fight Euro elections, May 22nd becomes the inescapable exit day, and the Prime Minister would then be able to say, it's my deal or no deal. Parliament needs to be very wary about a potential trap. So whilst things are absolutely chaotic in Westminster, our First Minister is trying to steady the boat and keep things on a reasonably even keel. But the danger of a no-deal Brexit is upon us. It really is upon us. In the Westminster Parliament, Yvette Cooper has been working with others in order to try and put together a bill that they can debate tomorrow and have passed within a day. That means to go right through the Commons procedure and then into the Lords. And this is a bill in order to stop Brexit from going forward with a no deal. It's quite a complicated issue, and of course they'll probably have to go back on Monday with more details of it all and more indicative votes, as we've witnessed last Wednesday and yesterday. And of course, if they had actually got together last night and passed Joanna Cherry's motion, this would not be a necessity. But the Labour, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party, did not vote for Joanna Cherry's motion. And 121 Labour members of the Westminster Parliament abstained when they could have given their vote. If it had been a free vote, as these indicative votes should have been, this would have been passed and we'd been out of the danger zone now. Yeah. So the Labour Party complained that the SNP did not support the customs union, and it only lost by 3 votes. That was Kenneth Clarke's motion yesterday. Only lost by 3 votes. But 10 Labour MPs abstained on that. They actually voted against it. So nearly 3 years since the referendum, which resulted in the majority of English and Welsh voters choosing to leave the European Union, and the majority of voters in Scotland and in Northern Ireland who voted to remain within the European Union, the political system of the United Kingdom is in crisis. Until now, the system has failed to make a decision on how to move forward. The withdrawal agreement, which was negotiated between Mrs. May's officials and the EU, has been rejected by Parliament, and Parliament has also rejected the idea of exiting the European Union without a deal. And the suggestion that there should be a people's vote or a second referendum has also not found a majority of votes. Neither has the idea of revoking Article 50 and staying in the European Union. The Prime Minister's deal was defeated 3 times in the House of Commons, and Parliament's attempts to find a way forward in a series of indicative votes last night failed to give a majority of any opinions on the options on the order paper. So the EU's chief Brexit negotiator, Michel Barnier, in Brussels today, has said over the last days a no-deal scenario has become more likely, but we can still hope to avoid it. The UK should now indicate the way forward, or indicate a plan, so important more than ever today. Now, we do have a clip from the MEP, it's the Scottish MEP, Alan Smith, and it was a question and answer session with Michel Barnier, which happened today.
And my next speaker is our Scottish-British colleague, Alan Smith.
Well, thank you, President. As you know, the Scots are people of few words, but we make them count. I don't think today's a grand speechifying day or a day for grand rhetoric, so 2 very precise questions to our negotiator. I'd also very warmly add my own sentiments to you for maintaining the discipline and the unity of purpose across the 27 EU member states. I express my general feeling of sadness about Brexit, but also a sense of embarrassment at the chaos into which Westminster has descended. So I'm sorry that you must respect the UK's constitution and deal with the interlocutors you have been forced to deal with, but I'm afraid you'll need to bear with us a little bit longer. But I think you're right in that no deal has become more likely in the last 24 hours. I think that remains very much on the table, and it's a matter of very great regret. I and colleagues across the House have raised previously the prospect of, in a no-deal scenario, can we treat the citizens' rights provisions as a standalone treaty? Because there's too many people are a hostage to this process. I don't mean Mrs. May, though she is, but there's too many citizens are in real trouble in their daily lives about this, and we must give them clarity. We must be ready to be the bigger party in this. Also on the future relationship and the financial provisions of it, I hear with interest your 5 proposals of structured cooperation on defence, but also in terms of the financial arrangements for participation by the UK in future EU programmes. I'm conscious that there isn't necessarily a settled will across the Commission and the Member States about the financial arrangements of that, but perhaps you could shed some light on what we're expecting as we get into the future negotiations, if we actually get to that point at all.
Thank you, Alan.
To Alan Smith, I would say yes, I will continue to respect the British parliamentary debate. I do listen to you very often when you take the floor. And it's quite invigorating.
So Alan Smith there was championing the cause of European citizens who obviously living in the United Kingdom, and of course British people who've made their homes in any one of the other 27 European countries, because if you go back 2-3 years ago, this was the very first thing that was to be agreed. But yet here we are all this time later, and nobody is any the wiser. And what Alan Smith was asking was for this to be maybe become a separate standalone treaty out with the withdrawal agreement, to give people certainty of their rights and responsibilities within the new framework that will happen post the UK leaving the European Union. Mrs May really is left with very little option now. One idea has been put forward that she would have a general election, but then many people have said that that would maybe even cause more problems. There still is the option of revoking Article 50. It would take merely a phone call to Jean-Claude Juncker to happen that, and followed possibly by a written letter, but it would be welcomed with open arms, I'm sure, by many, many people. So it's either her deal or no deal other than that. Investors and diplomats are in despair at the chaos. Such has been the volatility of the Brexit news from London that some traders have stepped away from dealing with sterling. It's been a seesaw since the news of Brexit referendum in 2016, and sterling fell again today. The option which came closest to obtaining a majority in the Parliament yesterday, Ken Clarke's motion to keep Britain within a customs union with the EU, failed to gain a majority by only 3 votes. A proposal to hold a confirmatory referendum on the deal got the most votes, but it was defeated by 292 votes to 280. So Monsieur Barnier is on record of saying that the EU is ready to accept the UK as a member of a customs union. Mrs May is wedged between the hardline Brexiteers of the ERG group who want a no deal, and the members of the other part of her party who want to leave with a deal. A no deal Brexit would have far-reaching implications over the whole of Scottish society. It is likely that one of the first things that we as citizens of Scotland will notice are very much higher food prices, possibly up to 10% or even more. Mark Sedwill, who is one of Britain's top civil servants, was reported in the Daily Mail saying that the government may be forced to impose direct British rule on Northern Ireland and to compromise national security. You may understand that at the moment there is no devolved administration in Northern Ireland because of this dispute between the DUP and Sinn Féin, and therefore they have not got the capacity to make new laws, rules and regulations that the civil servants there who are actually currently running the country to move to a new regime. So we'll break away from the Brexit. We're going to break away from the actual Brexit for a minute, but it is an issue that relates. Oh, I beg your pardon. I've misunderstood what's been said to me. So we're going to do a little story here from the Chamber of Commerce. I mean, actually, just about any news that we give you at the moment is going to be Brexit related. There's hardly any space for anything else. But Reuters have reported on a survey published today, fading exports, worsening finances, spurred on with a darker outlook for British companies last month, hurt by the slowing global economy and the political chaos surrounding Brexit. The British Chambers of Commerce, the BCC, quarterly economic survey showed a familiar picture of weak investment ahead of Britain's departure from the European Union across both manufacturing and service sectors. The BCC said growth in service exports, which account for about 45% of the total exports, slowed to their weakest rate since 2009. Overall, the BCC report adds to a string of downbeat data from businesses ahead of Brexit, despite solid consumer spending and a robust labour market. A Brexit deadlock MPs cannot agree on a way out. Our findings should serve as a clear warning that the ongoing impasse at Westminster is contributing to a sharp downturn in the real economy across the UK. Right, now, last Friday was the day upon which the European Union and the United Kingdom should have parted company. It was a very, very hectic day from many points of view, and whilst all the kerfuffle and the rumble and the ruffle was going on, there was a story which had huge implications and should have been out in the open. The Vote Leave campaign were accused, and they were found guilty of overspending during the Vote Leave campaign of the referendum in 2016, and they appealed against that conviction. However, on Friday, they decided to withdraw that appeal against their conviction. This was picked up by one of the Commons committees, and in today in the Parliament, Damian Collins, who is the chairman of that committee, had some things to say, and he was reporting about his committee's findings, the Privileges Committee's findings about Dominic Cumming and his refusal to attend the inquiry. And Tommy Shepherd, SNP, also spoke in response to what Damian Collins had to say. I think we can see a video clip of that now.
Mr. Damian Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Deputy Leader for his statement, and also for the Leader of the House for giving me notice that she would be unable to attend the Chamber today, and for the words that were read out by the Deputy Leader on behalf of the Government. And thank also the fellow members of the DCMS Select Committee and the Chair of the Privileges Committee and her colleagues as well for their investigation. We are not here today as a consequence of a rush of blood to the head, of the at-whim decision of a parliamentary committee to order in a private citizen to make them give evidence in front of us. We are today at the end of a process that has run for the best part of 10 months, from the committee's first attempt to invite a witness to attend, to then the process of the committee ordering that person to attend, to it then being reported to the House, and the House also ordering, and then reported to the Committee on Privileges to investigate. And I'm pleased that the Privileges Committee has agreed with the report of the DCMS Committee that we were within our rights to call this witness, and that the witness should have attended. Indeed, the witness himself, Mr. Cummings, was critical of the committee's inquiry. He was critical of other witnesses that we'd attended and the evidence that they'd given. And the main reason that we wished him to attend was so that he could respond to the allegations made by other witnesses. Now, that is a very important part of the inquiry, and also demonstrates the desire of the inquiry to hear all sides of the story. But we are frustrated in that process when witnesses refuse to confirm dates, put up spurious reasons for why they cannot attend, and then then seek to behave in a way, in correspondence with the committee, which certainly was contemptuous of the committee's work and therefore through that the work of the House. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise on behalf of the SNP to support the resolution and to urge the House to vote for it. But sadly, I have to say, without any great hope or expectation that doing so will have a great deal of effect. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Speaker cautioned us at the beginning of this discussion to try and restrict our comments to the narrow business under consideration. I had wanted to put this question in the wider context of the debate on Brexit and to consider the wider political considerations, but I won't do that, and I have taken the Speaker's advice, and in my imagination I have applied a blue pen to much of what I was going to say. But I do think it's appropriate for us to note why it was that the DCMS Committee wanted to hear from Mr Cummings in the first place. And that is because many of the concerns that were expressed about the Vote Leave campaign exemplified some of the concerns about the debate on fake news that they were having an inquiry into. And I don't want to, as I say, I shan't go into any great detail about this, but I think as a matter of record, we have to say that the Vote Leave campaign does stand accused of engaging in lies and propaganda and willful distortion of the facts. It is a fact that it has been found guilty by the Information Commissioner of breaking the regulations on the gathering of personal data, and it is a fact that it broke the law and has been fined by the Electoral Commission for its expenses. Now, it seems to me that it would be legitimate for Mr Cummings to engage with the committee to talk about those things, and it seems to me also that his refusal to do so and to come before the committee, and that being the reason why this motion is here today, does indicate to me that maybe he has something to hide, or that he is not able to mount a defence of the accusations that have been put there. And that seems to me something that should concern this House. Others have said that, and I think it's true, that we need to be concerned, what does admonishment actually mean? What sort of sanction or leverage is this really at the end of the day? I fear it is not a very great one, and I do think this instance and others should lead us into reflection about whether or not our procedures are adequate for House of Commons inquiries into matters of public concern, and whether we need additional powers to be able to compel people to give evidence when it is in the public interest to do so, as indeed many other countries have. I make no suggestion as to how that might happen, but I simply want to put on the table that it should happen. Finally, Mr Deputy Speaker, I do think we are entitled, without going into the detailed political debate, but we are entitled to form opinions and to perhaps draw conclusions as to the intentions and attitude of Mr Cummings from what we have heard described before us in the motion. Now, I, and I think many other colleagues, will have watched the recent BBC drama, the Brexit, the Uncivil War, which, to my mind, has a very generous and sympathetic portrayal of Dominic Cummings. It suggests that he is some sort of tortured genius. I'll take it in a moment. It suggests he is some sort of tortured genius, a radical, a free thinker, an iconoclast, someone who wants to engage in the noblest notions of sovereignty and democracy, and who wouldn't debase himself for a moment with gutter politics. But I'm not sure that's entirely the case. And before I suggest an alternative, I will happily take an intervention.
Does he not understand? I think the direction that Mr Speaker gave at the beginning of this debate was for a very important reason, that this is a serious discussion, an admonishment of somebody for a failure to appear before a committee. And it should be about the facts of that decision to not appear or otherwise. And it should not...
Order. I also know what was said, and I will be the judge of whether it's stretching beyond or remaining within the advice that Mr Speaker gave. I can assure you I'm carefully listening. At the moment we've not tread outside. I think we are coming towards the end of the speech anyhow, and we all know that there are limits which we shouldn't go beyond. I think to mention the person in passing is one thing. What I don't want to do is to get into an argument about the best or the weakness of what the examples are. It's purely about the privilege, I agree, but we certainly haven't stepped outside. But I do thank Tommy Shepherd.
Well, thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and I have been keeping your eye very carefully to try and make sure I don't stray beyond the bounds of the limitations that were set. So I will conclude by simply saying that I have drawn my own opinions from what has happened in this case as to the character of Mr. Cummings, and perhaps the truth is rather more mundane. Perhaps he is just a posh boy after all, from a privileged background, who has a sense of entitlement that means he doesn't see himself as having to account to his peers for his actions. And therefore, I rather fear that the honourable gentleman from Lichfield is correct, actually. I rather fear that if we do pass this as we should, that at his next dinner party it will be worn as a badge of honour, and he will continue the contempt of this House, because there are people of his class who regard democratic institutions like this in precisely that way.
So it's Tommy Shepherd talking about the Leave campaign leader, Dominic Cummings. And so this is going to be the last story for our bulletin tonight, and it's about oil price rises. They've actually climbed to a 5-month high, and this has been supported by firm Chinese economic data and the possibility of more sanctions against Iran and further Venezuelan supply disruptions. Brent crude rose 15 cents to $69.16 a barrel. It did actually reach 69.50, the highest since mid-November. Venezuela's Jose crude export terminal halted operations due to a lack of electricity supply. Two sources with knowledge of the situation said that after restarting on Friday following a prolonged blackout, OPEC production cuts helped push the supply to a 4-year low in March, a Reuters survey found. The world's biggest exporter of oil, which is Saudi Arabia, over-delivered on the OPEC's supply cutting pact, while the Venezuelan output fell further due to the US sanctions and earlier power outages. So thank you very much for being with us this evening. Much smaller, shorter program than yesterday's. We'll be here again tomorrow night, and we'll let you know what's happened between then and now. Thanks for watching. See you then. Bye-bye.